All right, let's take a trip back to 1945. Imagine the end of World War II. The world was celebrating the defeat of Germany. For many, it was a time of joy, flags waving in the streets. But for Germany, it was a different story. They were at rock bottom after a long, brutal war.
Absolutely. Things were not easy in post-war Germany. The place was a mess. Roads and bridges were broken, and cities like Berlin looked like shadows of their former selves. People struggled to find basic things like food and shelter. It was chaos everywhere you looked. The old ways were gone, and they needed a big change.
Let's talk about Germany in 1945 and how the cities were changed. After the end of the war, many cities like Berlin and Dresden were hardly recognizable. They were in ruins. Roads, bridges, and homes. Everything was in pieces. It must have been difficult to start rebuilding something from such a broken place. Just think, food and water were hard to find, and people had to fight every day for survival.
Yes, and it wasn't just the physical ruins that were difficult. There was an influx of people, too. Many refugees came from the east and had nowhere to go. The economy was not working, and there were no jobs. And without jobs, there was no money. It was a cycle of hardship. The Reichsmark lost its value, making trade and buying almost impossible. It was as if life had stopped, and survival was the only goal.
Absolutely. This was the time when the black market became very important. People traded anything they could find just to have bread or coal. It was truly a time of make do. The government structures were not there to help people get what they needed. So people had to fend for themselves, finding ways to live one day at a time. It's important to remember these struggles while thinking about how far we have come.
Yes, indeed. You know, people were feeling at the lowest ebb of wretchedness during this time. It was not just about physical needs. Spiritually and emotionally, the country was very low. The loss and wreckage were immense, and for many, hope was hard to hold on to. But it was an important moment, a time to decide on a new path. And by the way, if you're enjoying our talk and want the full transcript, click the Join button. Your support means a lot to us.
Let's dive into the idea of 0 hour. This term is a symbol of hope for a new start in post-war Germany. Imagine hitting the reset button after years of war, chaos, and hardship. It was a chance to rebuild, to move forward. But it wasn't just about rebuilding cities. It was also about rebuilding hearts and minds, creating a new beginning after such a dark period in history.
That's right. However, the concept of just forgetting the past and starting over is very complicated. The memory of the war and the terrible things that happened could not be easily forgotten or ignored. Many people still faced all the wreckage, both physically and emotionally. They had to figure out how to move forward with these memories and still build a new, better society. So 0 hour was more than just a clean slate. It was about facing those challenges too.
Exactly. 0 hour was like a dream shared by many people in society at that time. They hoped it could be the moment to leave the old ways behind, to start fresh. But societal change is very complex. It needs more than just the desire for change. Changing how people think and feel after such a difficult time wasn't going to be instant. There were a lot of expectations on this new hour, but the reality was that it needed effort and time to bring them to life.
Precisely. The Allies understood that transforming Germany required more than rebuilding the physical structures. It involved re-education and getting people to think in democratic ways. This was especially significant because democracy had to be learned. After years under a dictatorship, people needed to understand and adopt new ideas about freedom and equality. It wasn't about imposing, but encouraging people to reflect on their past actions under the regime. This marked a serious challenge and a crucial shift in creating a new Germany.
So, after the war, Germany had to change from a dictatorship to a democracy. That needed re-education. The Allies wanted to teach Germans how democracies work. It wasn't just about telling people to vote, but about understanding democracy and freedom deeper.
Exactly. To help with this re-education, Germans were shown documentaries. These films made people see the terrible things that happened during the war. They needed to face the past horrors so they could move on and learn to live differently. It was about confronting history and understanding the mistakes.
Right, this idea of re-education went beyond just films. There were cultural reforms too. For example, newspapers like the Süddeutsche Zeitung started. They began with just a few pages, but they played a key role. They were a symbol of change, led by German journalists but encouraged by the Allies to promote a new way of thinking.
And let's not forget the Nuremberg trials. They were a huge part of confronting Nazi crimes. Seeing these trials was hard for many Germans, but necessary. They showed how dangerous the old regime was and made people think about justice and responsibility in a new way. It was all part of learning from the past.
After the war, Germany was not just a single country anymore. It was divided into zones controlled by different Allied powers. Each of these zones had a unique way of re-educating the German people. In the Soviet zone, the focus was on creating a socialist society. The people there were taught about socialism as a model for their future. This meant changing the way people thought and acted, promoting community support over individual success.
It's interesting how this varied across different regions. In Weimar, for example, the inhabitants were taken on tours of the Buchenwald concentration camp. This was meant to show them the terrible consequences of Nazi beliefs and actions up close. It wasn't just about reading or watching films. It was about experiencing the harsh realities. By facing these past horrors directly, people were expected to see the importance of change in their society.
What's striking is how each victorious power interpreted re-education. The Soviets had one approach, focusing on the socialist structure and shaping thoughts around it. Meanwhile, the Western Allies emphasized democracy and free thinking. This diversity in re-education strategies showed the complexities in reshaping a country's identity. The aim was to help people think critically and embrace democratic values, but it was a huge challenge given Germany's past.
Indeed, and many hoped socialism in the Soviet zone would be a fresh start. People believed in a new world where everyone would have an equal chance. But soon, the harsh reality of state communism set in. It was nothing like the ideal many had imagined. Government control turned it into something rigid and oppressive, proving again how hard it is to balance ideals with real-life governance. It wasn't the society some had fought so hard for during the war.
Let's begin with talking about denazification. After the war, it was clear that removing Nazis from key positions was crucial for a fresh start. The Allies needed to change the old ways and replace Nazi members with people who supported democratic values. This process was tough as 8.5 million Germans had been part of the Nazi Party, but it had to be done to ensure a new and fair society could emerge.
The Allied Control Council set out detailed guidelines on how to deal with those who were involved with the Nazi regime. They wanted to make sure that people in powerful roles were in support of democracy, or at least accepted it. In 1946, they implemented a directive to replace the elites and deal with active Nazis. The goal was to ensure that those in leading roles did not have ties to the old regime and were ready to work for a democratic future.
The United States adopted a systematic approach to denazification. In their zone, they used complex questionnaires filled with 131 questions to categorize Germans. This bureaucratic process aimed to identify different levels of guilt among the people. Only a small number, around 1.5%, fell into the top categories considered to be the main culprits. Many were labeled as exonerated, though allowing them to return to society and pursue new roles.
But this process had mixed results. Because most Germans came out of it as exonerated, many former Nazis were able to return to positions of power without facing much consequence. This caused issues as people who had supported the previous regime were back in influential roles. It showed the difficulties in fully resetting a society and highlighted how complex true justice can be in a situation with many individuals involved from the past regime.
The way East Germany handled denazification was very different from the West. They believed in a strict approach from the get-go. In East Germany, the process was more rigorous and thorough. This meant that many who had once supported the Nazi Party were quickly removed from their positions. It was not just about changing jobs, but about changing the entire system, making sure the old ways couldn't creep back in.
Yes, indeed. In East Germany, there was a major change in who held power. They wanted to make sure the past had no place in the new world they were building. This often meant appointing people with loyalty to the new socialist regime, even if they didn't have much experience. These people's judges took over the roles. However, It sometimes led to unjust decisions because these judges weren't always well trained.
On the other hand, West Germany was more lenient in the beginning. Many former Nazis found themselves back in important roles sooner than expected. The West took a softer approach as they tried to balance between punishment and moving forward. It was a complicated path because true justice wasn't easy to achieve when so many people were involved. Completely clearing the past was challenging.
Finding justice was indeed a big task. In West Germany, many people felt that since ex-Nazis were back in their positions, not much had really changed. They were seen working in places like government offices and schools. There was a struggle to ensure that society truly moved forward. This showed how hard it is to completely reset and create a fair society when the shadows of the past linger. Thanks for following us on this journey. If you enjoyed our series, please like this episode and leave a comment. It helps us reach more people and keep creating great content. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. For those who want the full text of our podcast series, consider joining our YouTube membership. We appreciate your support and are excited to bring you more stories soon.